right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 118 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. We are having some technical difficulties, which is why we're starting 15 minutes late. But our special guest, Dr. Charles McKelvey, is having internet issues, and he is, trying to stream live from Cuba. And so obviously, that probably explains the technical difficulties he's having.
I mean, maybe you should add under the conditions of a complete power blackout. So, yeah, that's what makes it challenging.
And 60, I wrote Sisxty in my title, Sisxty, 62-year embargo. So, that's who we're going to blame for our issues today. But we're going to go ahead. We haven't convened for about a week and a half. So there's quite a few things that we can discuss, including what our primary topic, which was going to be, we're going to talk about Cuba, the embargo, and things of that nature. But where to start? I mean, I think, we might as well start with Cuba. Again, we were really hoping to have Dr. McKelvey with us, but, and we linked to his blog spot, Substack, in the description of the video. But his last two articles in his Substack were talking about the 60-hour blackout that just occurred in Cuba. And then his most recent one was kind of explaining what was going on and why that happened. But, we feel for these societies that have been sacrificing tremendously, for their sovereignty and, to be dominated and exploited by the Western imperialism. And, I really believe that the future is bright for these societies, North Korea, Cuba, as soon as the Western empire, their total economic hegemony is weakening currently, and it's in decline. And I think it's just a matter of time before, these countries that have sacrificed for decades are going to be able to, have more fuller economic relations with China, with Russia. It's an interesting question. There's a lot of frustration that China, for instance, is not doing more for Cuba, and I think there's reasons for that. And I was really hoping to have Charles weigh in on that, but off the top of my head, I think it's related to the fact that it's dangerous for China, right? Because
look at the distances. That's the thing. Russia and China are so far away, and the US is so goddamn close. It's a miracle they've been able to resist this long. I mean, can you imagine 62 years under embargo? And still managing to equip one of the most, one of the highest quality doctor corps in the world, medical professions in the world. Absolutely stunning.
Life expectancy is higher in Cuba than in the United States, despite all that. But I
think Mexico is also higher, so that's not. Sorry.
I do want to recommend everyone read Charles' second article, not the most recent one. Read them both, but the one, the second article, how should I say this? Not the most recent one, but the second most recent one. He really just kind of, you get a good insight into how the people of Cuba are dealing with, these struggles and the 60-hour blackout. It's really insightful. So,
it's different in each country. But my first question, if Charles McKelvey, was it, were able to join us, would have been, does Cuba have some sort of delegation in Kazan, in the big BRIC summit? And I'm really hoping they do, because it looks like all of that patience, as you said about North Korea and other places under siege, is about to get paid off. That's the way it looks to me. It would be encouraging if they were Cuban
And
delegates.
I was going to launch into my off the top of my head reasons why China hasn't been more involved, and I think it's related to the sanctions against Cuba, and it's against the U.S. designation of Cuba as a sponsor of terrorism, right? So Cuba is designated by the United States as a sponsor of terror, and any entity, any financial entity or government entity doing business with them would face serious
secondary sanctions, yeah,
repercussions. And so China is just not willing to risk that. And I don't, it's a judgment call, and it's hard it's hard not to blame them. It's hard to blame them for doing that. The United States still is a huge economy, and I heard 85% of all commerce is done in U.S. dollars. Does that sound accurate?
What percentage did you say?
85.
85%. No,
done in
that's
U.S.
not too high.
dollars.
I think that's an outdated number.
It might be. And then I heard like the yuan, for instance, is about 6%. So, there's still, so the U.S. still wields incredible economic power, and it's kind of suicidal to, to fight against that at this point. But BRICS is the answer to that. BRICS is the alternative to U.S. hegemony, and like you said, Ben, it's just a matter of time before the rest of the world, is able to break the back of Western imperialism and their economic hegemony, their economic power. But that's what BRICS is all about, and so it's a tremendous thing. So
I think
go ahead.
That's waning so fast. I mean, the initial place that was too bad to touch was Syria. The Caesar sanctions. You can't even go in to reconstruct a highway or something, because then your companies, whether you're German or whatever, are going to be under sanction. But there's no greater, I think, in the Western world, sponsor of terrorism and evil in the world today than Russia. And Russia's trade is booming, and 90% of it, especially with China, is in local currencies, the ruble, yuan. So that's a success case. And I haven't, but Alexander Mercouris of the Duran has read the full statement from this Kazan summit, the BRICS Kazan declaration. It's very polite. There's no US, there's no EU in there, there's no dollar in there. But it's basically paving the way for local currency exchanges, for grain, for heavy metals, for gold. And that's the first step. They don't want to do a new world global reserve currency. They just want to create these options. You have this
China
other
does continue to trade with Russia. And so it begs the question, all the sanctions against Russia, why are they able to trade with Russia and then not, unload,
as it does with Iran,
tankers and not tankers, but cargo ships full of solar panels, for instance, to Cuba, who could definitely use them. So these are,
and but President Pezeshkian, who still sounds Armenian to me anyway, President Pezeshkian of Iran, with the highest level of the Iranian delegates, is there in Kazan. It's like BRICS has two eyes in it already. Like absolute full membership is how that looks, and they're supposed to be under very threatening embargoes, aren't they?
So it's a good question. Why can China do certain things but not help Cuba? And I don't have the answers.
I go back to original understanding. The U.S. is too close.
Now Russia has helped Cuba both in the Soviet period and today.
Yeah.
It still sends plane loads of stuff, and they still give tourism. It's still a hot tourism destination for Russians. So whatever China's worried about, Russia has not been worried about that and just has continued supporting Cuba. And it's been actually a two-way street, which unfortunately with most countries in Russia, it's a one-way street. Russia helps them and don't really get much in return. But Cuba does help. Actually, they did a program. They helped the Chernobyl victims. Cuban doctors would give, because it's a chronic, if you have radiation exposure, it's a chronic condition. So that Cuba's, so it's been a two-way street. I'm sorry, Ben, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask you because that's the end of the Soviet period, but the modern Russian period, pre-SMO, so pre-2022, was very much within the lanes, within the confines, by the rules of the West. Do you know if this?
No, they still sent stuff to Cuba. They did still.
They did. Okay,
They did.
Despite the sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's good to know. I did not know that.
Charles, I know your internet is super slow. I'm not sure you can hear me or if we can hear you, but can you hear us? Can you say anything? Okay.
Yeah. Charles is on a laptop battery, I think, connecting via cellular internet. So this might not actually work today, but we're hopeful. Maybe there's a miracle.
Yeah, and maybe he can hear us, but we can't hear him. And so I'm gonna put him back in the lobby just so we're not distracted. But and then MK is asking, why would China help Cuba? I mean, what can Cuba offer China? Is China just about to hand out free stuff in an altruistic way? I mean, they do, of course, because all over the world, they've given loans, they've forgiven loans, and so there's definitely an altruistic aspect to China's approach to foreign policy. So my guess is the reason why China doesn't is because of the designation as the Cuban government as a state sponsor of terror. I'm not sure if Russia has been designated as a state sponsor of terror. I don't know. So these are things that unfortunately I lack expertise on, but I'm fairly confident that China has solid reasons for its approach, which I would end up agreeing with, but I'm just not certain of the specifics. So we've been gone for 3 episodes. It's a long time. Not a lot has happened, but a few things have happened. So North Korea recently liberated one of the provinces there, one of the villages in Ukraine, because I saw.
Are they in Kursk region? They're helping in Kursk region, right?
Well, I think it was some Russians trolling the Western media, but they had
hoisting the flag,
flag on a building that they had liberated as a joke.
Yeah.
But that's a real big story in the West, all about these North Koreans invading Ukraine. And there's also, obviously, Yahya Sinwar was assassinated, killed, in combat. That's been a really big story.
He needs to be as epic as Mr. Aaron Brushnell, was it? The guy who self-immolated him? Because his last moments were that fucking epic. I think the Arab world saw that for what it was. Did the Israelis think this was, pathetic or somehow humiliating or something? Why did they? Because I think the IDF published this video, right? This came from Israel. And it got just the opposite effect of whatever they wanted. Because I didn't know much about Sinwar, but now I look at him as, not Che Guevara-esque, but a man, died during the fight. Right,
which stands in contrast to how they've been telling us, he's been living below, in a bunker, hiding is what the propaganda has been telling us about him. So no, I mean, a lot of people, that get trotted out on the Western press, on shows like Piers Morgan and even mainstream media that might, defend Palestine, they're always going to, call Hamas a terrorist and denounce Sinwar.
Hezbollah
but definitely, I don't think, personally, I'm not going to do that. Like, Hamas is a resistance organization. And Sinwar is a hero. I mean, he's a hero of the Palestinian people. He's a hero of the resistance movement. And so I definitely do not denounce him as a terrorist and want to give my full-throated endorsement to what he was able to accomplish. And he has an amazing story. He's got a book that I guess Amazon just pulled because he's a terrorist. Like they'll allow
that was smuggled out from an Israeli dungeon / whatever they, he was in jail when he wrote that.
No, it's an incredible story. And, it was available on Amazon. I'm not sure where you can get it now, but it's his own like autobiography, or it might even be a work of fiction where he's kind of explaining his life, but with like different names and things. Because I heard Justin Podur last night on Electronic Intifada. He was being interviewed. He had read it. And it seemed like it wasn't quite an autobiography. It was kind of like a biography of his life, but like using different names and things. Anyway, what about you, Ian? I'd like to hear your thoughts on Sinwar.
Or perhaps, since it's closer to you, you can sort of harken back to the DPRK Russia issue.
Yeah,
if you want.
Take your pick.
I was going to say is that the propaganda attitude, the mindsets that both Israelis and NATO organizations have a very inwardly focused attitude. They don't really think, what does this look like to people outside of our echo chambers? So they'll show somebody in his dying moments, and to them it's like, look,
missing an arm.
Yes. And other people see it as heroic. And you can actually see that there was I cannot remember the name of it, but there was there was a Chinese movie a few years ago. This was in 2021, and this was about the Chinese incursion into Korea during the Korean War.
Battle at Lake Changjin, perhaps?
Yes.
This is the one where Mao's son actually died.
Yes. And
gorgeous movie.
Chinese, they're proud that, we had basically World War II, well, not even World War II weapons, just had these very old
Katyushas.
Basically, and dynamite and just whatever, very little heavy equipment, and went in and beat tanks and aircraft, and everything. And, I remember Western reviewers just being confused by this because, they just, to them, it's very much, it has to be Black Hawk Down, where, you're just have complete technological superiority. They can't even understand a narrative that doesn't involve technological superiority. So, I think the Israelis kind of have that same mindset, so they themselves, it wasn't a leaked video, it was a shared video because, they're proud of it. Look, we got this guy with our advanced weapons. And I think that's actually the problem Israel is having right now, because they're very, really, they've been, there were signals of this, like in the earlier war with Lebanon, before that there've been other cases, but the last year has really shown the IDF is not an effective fighting force. They suck. They didn't even make it half a kilometer into Lebanon before they got.
They're good at slaughtering civilians and kids, but not.
With bombs. If somebody gives, it's not hard for any military force to kill large numbers of civilians. What they say. But that's the only thing they're actually good at. So they can't fight. And I think everybody outside of NATO echo chambers has noticed that is not gonna notice that they can't fight for shit. It's so yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
So no, that's a good point. Their military capacity has limitations, but what it's capable of is destroying, entire cities and entire neighborhoods, and they've really pretty much destroyed Gaza. I heard at least 50% of the buildings were destroyed, and in some areas, it's more like 100%.
It's a moonscape, yeah.
And it's, that's a deterrent, right? It's like, if you mess with us, we're gonna Gaza you. Like that's what they're telling Lebanon. And
Well, the problem is it's really not capability, because it's not even an Israeli capability. That yes, if any country gets an unlimited quantity of let's just call them what they are, NATO weapons, of British and American and German weapons. If someone just gets
little bit of
unlimited
French.
quantities of course, of course they can level cities that can't shoot back. I mean, anybody can win against an opponent that can't shoot back. But even in Gaza, they still have not won. They still haven't gotten the hostages back. Doesn't look like they've actually militarily won anywhere, even in the
try Tehran with the
yeah.
S-400 there.
Yeah, because that's the problem. Hamas is not their strongest enemy; it's their weakest enemy. And even Hezbollah is not their strongest enemy; it's their second weakest enemy. And if they're
but still much stronger than Hamas.
Yes, and so I mean, Iran is of course stronger than both of them. So what are they going to do? I
think. Wait! Before we move on, I had a related thought because of this. Ever since World War II, their movies, as Ian said, likes this technical superiority. Look at our wonderful, fantastic, high-tech weapons in the air. They don't like the underdog, the partisan movement, which was mostly Soviet, but it was in parts of Eastern Europe and also France. The only part they picked up here and there in movies was the French underground partisan movement. The resistance against Nazi occupation. I'm talking about those guys who sometimes blow up train tracks and execute, find some officers and kill them. Those guys. But they don't appreciate, Zoya Kozmodemskaya. I think there's a metro station to her, who was a heroic slaughtered girl in Russia, which spurred them into action. They don't, there's this beautiful Stevo Filipovic, the same in Yugoslavia. The guy died with his arms right out, and he became the symbol for Tito's resistance and slaughtering Nazis. And he died in a miserable way, but showed defiance. And that's exactly what I saw in Yahya Sinwar. His final moments, without an arm, with his other arm, he threw some kind of a stick, I think, at the drone that was taking this footage as a final act of defiance. I mean, that's a man. Sorry about this man thing, but yeah, they're okay with killing women and children. But when they run into a wall of Hezbollah, they're actually fighting men, determined to fucking blow up their tanks because they have heaps of ATGMs and yeah, fight back. And they're not used to that. That's the thoughts I have.
But there is this tremendous asymmetry with the fact that they are supplied with all these standoff weapons, and they can just sit back without being, injured themselves or in any danger themselves, and level entire neighborhoods of civilians. And that's what they've been doing. That's what they did in Gaza, and that's what they're threatening Lebanon with. And they're saying, you need to stop, or we're going to destroy you, like we destroyed Gaza.
This was Israeli deterrence, but up until the point where they're deterred, and as I admit I'm not really up to date with the news, but I heard it was leaked, like from a classified document, like this is what we're trying to attack in Iran. And since the leak went through, they said, oh, well, we have to push this off. And they've been pushing it off for a long time. And one of the reasons, I think, is the S-400 is in Tehran, and you're not going to just get through that with your dinky F-13 sort of flying boondoggles worth billions and billions of dollars, up until they're deterred from action. And that's when this whole, it's not a philosophy, but their strategic approach to the Middle East evaporates, saying, if you touch us, we will destroy your neighborhoods and slaughter you, is gone. And that's when everybody around them has a second thought. Shit, what have we been doing all these years, including those little compradors, in Jordan and Egypt and places like that. They have to think of a second or a third or some other option, before they're strung up.
So I heard this morning, the United States is sending 10, aircraft refueling planes. So this is on Telegram, and it might just be sensational. But if the United States is sending 10 refueling aircrafts to the area, that really means that they're preparing for a large operation against Iran. But Iran has the power to cripple Israel, right? They can take out their nuclear plant. They can take out the desalination plants, like Ian mentioned a couple of shows ago. They can take out the energy.
Power generation, yeah.
Yeah. So, they can really do to Israel what Israel, is doing to Gaza and Lebanon. And so there's a big deterrent. And I think it's hard to understand what's going on, but I think Israel is just, they're waiting because they're making preparations, right? They're getting prepared for a big war against Iran, and as part of that war, they have to be ready to have all of their infrastructure destroyed, and still put up resistance. And so, I mean, it's going to be interesting, but I don't know. I don't see how it can't evolve. And the question is it going to evolve before the election, or are they going to wait till after the election? Or could it be, timed to coincide before the election to maximize the impact on the election? Or are they just going to wait till the election's over and then, they'll have all their pieces in place and launch a big war? But I know other people disagree. Max was saying there's no way the United States is going to go to war with Iran. I'm not sure he said that. I shouldn't even
look.
He was saying there's no way it's going to go to a World War III. He said there could be a regional war, but not World War III. But what do you guys think? Is the U.S. going to be at war with Iran? Are they going to be refueling Israeli jets that are bombing the nuclear facilities, the energy facilities, the infrastructure of Iran? And if so, when?
No, nonsense. That's maybe I want to hear from Ian first, but my quick answer is no. I do have a solid explanation, though. Do you want to go first, Ian?
Sure. They might be waiting till after the election, which would make sense. Because Trump is the fascist and Kamala Harris is the wise. I don't even remember what race. It's almost like I have to. What race is Kamala Harris pretending to be right now? She's the first, our first African American president or whatever. She's identifying as. Maybe next week she'll be Native American. Who knows? But it's hard to say, because the problem is if Israel hits Iran hard enough. Iran is nowhere to go. They can't look weak. So if Israel does something nasty enough back to them, they'll have to respond to that. And they've probably already thought about what
that response is already set on autopilot, from what I understand.
Yeah.
So that's going to come instantly. Yeah.
Yeah. And they could, if we're, at least theoretically, I'm pretty sure they can just do what we were talking about, just level Israel to the extent Israel leveled Gaza. If they do something like that, the problem is, and why I disagree with Max, is one, he's assuming that it's a united front, that there's this shadowy puppet masters who have a master plan. One, I don't think that's true. I don't think they're this ownership class is unified anywhere to the extent they're given credit for. I also don't think they're as competent as everyone gives them credit for some reason. I don't look at this room of people at the White House and say, wow, what a competent team. I'm sure they will take a measured and intelligent response. No. So I could, I don't think they want, I actually say that with a high degree of certainty. They don't want a regional war with Iran, especially because it could escalate to a world war. I don't think they want one, but I also don't think they're competent enough and don't know. Using leverage requires someone to be competent, and they don't know how to do that. So I think it's very easy for them to just blunder into a regional war.
Okay. Not to switch topics, but this reminds, it's like the last desperate throw of the dice, like Zelensky's victory plan. We don't have to talk about that. But have you seen his T-shirt, the "Make Russia Small Again"? Anyway, this is the last desperate throw of the dice. One, Exhibit A of the THAAD weapon system, right? They sent 2 batteries and 100 people each, according to it. There's 7 of these in the world, so rare and expensive. But really not a big deal, because they can shoot 48 interceptors each, and that's a 2-tap. So they can shoot down 24. They can shoot down 48 targets. Now Iran already sent hundreds just in a display. So that's worth nothing. I mean, why get into a war that you absolutely can't win? America has shown that it has the inability to bail you out because they sent all the fucking Patriots to Ukraine. Your what do you call it? Iron Dome is looking like a cauldron. You could turn it upside down and filter pasta in it. You know, anything can pretty much get through. The other side has hypersonics. There is no defense in the West or anywhere else in the world against it. And they can't just cripple the economy of Israel, which is bad enough for Netanyahu, but also if, you know, what they want is to rope the US in, exactly like Ukraine does. That's the symmetry in this. But what is the West going to do if their economy goes down because, you know, the Strait of Hormuz is the one that Iran controls, right? I get mixed up with my straits.
Hormuz, yes.
If that's locked down, like 60% of the world's oil traffic, you know, China needs that, Russia needs that. So I mean, again, President Pezeshkian is in Kazan at the head of the BRICS meeting. He's got friends. Basically, Iran has friends that they need an intact Iran. So do they want to actually, which they've been avoiding for 2 years, to get into open war with Russia or open war with China? Because that's something that I see China would actually step up for, while destroying the Comprador's energy facilities, meaning the Saudi facilities, the Qatari facilities, the Emirati facilities, which they have the absolute ability to do. One other small word. This came from the Ayatollah, right? When he came out and did the Sunday sermon that he rarely does, and most of his administration was there, as you know, the other side said, Israel said, we're going to do a devastating, well, they didn't say decapitating, but, you know, we're going to hit the leadership. And he was out there in the open saying, here I am. What the fuck? Come on, strike me, I dare you. And he said the IRGC is structured in a way is that the local, basically geographic localities, whenever something happens, they have the automatic authorization to know exactly where and what to strike back. You know, that's on autopilot. It doesn't have to have the Ayatollah or anybody give orders from the top. You know, do you want to risk that? If you're, forget Biden and forget Blinken and Hochstein, you know, the two lawyers of Netanyahu. But think about the people in the Pentagon. Think about the people atop of the big corporations, you know, who depend on stable energy prices. Do you want to risk that? I think that's a definite no.
Well, it's definitely opening the Pandora's box. I mean, to even retaliate, even if Israel just retaliates like they've been saying they're going to do to the October 1st attacks. That's opening the Pandora's box, because Iran has said straight up, we're gonna
24 days ago, by the way,
we're gonna fire 1,000 missiles. We fired 200 the last time. We'll fire 1,000 if you guys attack us. And so it's really opening up Pandora's box. And I think my understanding is it's 20% of global energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz, which is still enough to destroy the global economy if that gets disrupted. And so are they ready? Do they have everything in place? Is there a consensus that they want to hit the go button on this operation, on this, it'll be historic. It would be, things would never be the same again. And I'm just not feeling like they're ready to do that. But at least maybe until after the election, they get their figurehead Kamala in place and they'll be good to go. On the other hand, maybe they want to do it before the election and then hand it off to Trump. Here, Trump, you can deal with this mess that we just created. Good luck. I don't know.
But Ian, do you have anything?
So, it's going to be interesting. The election is going to be what, in 10 days? Is that right? Is it like the 5th of November? So that's not a lot of time. We're gonna be getting answers really soon about who's gonna be the next figurehead. That's gonna be interesting. And then whether or not, what is Israel gonna do? And it seems, when are people gonna start saying that Israel was what's that word? Deterred. Israel was deterred. How much longer before the Western press starts saying Israel has been deterred? Or at least maybe not the Western press, but at least informed, commentators that say, hey, Israel back down. They're not gonna They're not gonna do it. Yeah, and then
Before
definitely go ahead.
before we inevitably address the election, which I'm not up to date, you guys will have to bring me up to date what the fuck's going on in the US. One further thought that I had about the Middle East situation is, again, none of this really scares me. I don't think the US is going to risk it. But one thing that scares me about whoever leaked this paper, which seems to be authentic according to, you know, Larry Johnson and the CIA, people familiar with intelligence matters, is it was very explicit that, you know, Netanyahu has nukes, which was always, you know, an open secret, but, you know, don't write it down, don't say it out loud. But it's on paper, and there hasn't really been a big, you know, mudslinging based on it.
Yeah,
I thought the US has had laws that someone
no.
who's outside of the nuclear non-proliferation, right, and has basically illegal nukes, you can't trade with them, you can't send weapons to them. There's this law, the Leahy law, Leha, I'm not exactly sure on the pronunciation. I thought this would have legal ramifications in the US, because that's the one thing that scares me. If they get so desperate as to, say, bring the temple down, you know, the Samson option, as they call it,
Right.
That's when we're in trouble.
Yeah, no, they definitely, I mean, have nuclear weapons. It's everybody knows that, but yeah, it's not officially acknowledged by the United States, because if they officially acknowledged it, then they would be required to, you know, stop giving them all the aid and support that they give them. And so it just goes to show the joke of the, you know, their pretense to adhere to the rule of law. You know, it's an oligarchy, and they don't constrain themselves by the rule of law. You know, that's just not how reality works. So, and that's, you know, that's a prime illustration. I mean, there's thousands of illustrations of how they don't constrain themselves by the rule of law, the Constitution. None of that matters to them. You know, first and foremost is their own understanding of their own political and economic interests, and they pursue those things without restraint. And you know,
what do you think about the Five Eyes, the big anti-China collective that this paper was supposed to be, you know, confidential to? What do they think about this? Because obviously the US doesn't apply laws to itself. That's now obvious. But, you know, it's explicit now. I think it was Mordecai Vanunu who originally leaked that. He's still sitting in an Israeli jail somewhere for that. And obviously that can be swept under the rug. But this is an official US intelligence paper. I'm not sure about the designation. Do the French think about this? Do the Brits think about this? Do the Kiwis down under in New Zealand think about this? Nothing. I thought this would have ripple effects, you know, everywhere.
The analysis that I saw showed that, you know, the intel that we allowed those other governments to view, you could kind of see the pecking order in this document. And
not all of it was.
Yeah,
not all of it was Five Eyes.
They were only allowed to see certain parts of it and not others, which thought it might be humiliating for these alleged partners, you know, of the United States to see that what they're allowed access to and what they're not. But
that's right. Part of it was no for, right? No foreign eyes. Yep.
Yes.
You're right. Yep.
But yeah, it's an interesting document. And the question is, was that document deliberately leaked on purpose to deter Israel? Or, you know, was it something that they didn't really want out there? And it was an actual leaker that did the leaking. I mean, that's an interesting question. And I don't have the answer to that. If it was a legitimate leaker, or if it was, you know, came from the highest level for a reason. I'm not sure.
I mean, you can look at the effects.
Ian, let's talk. I was going to switch the subject to the North Koreans, but okay. So it's interesting that there haven't been like outright denials. I think, I mean, I saw on Telegram a statement from Putin saying that, you know, I forget what he said, but it was a real interesting comment. In fact, I could find it if nobody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it was.
The point is, it's not just being outright denied by the Russian Federation, or even North Korea, for that matter.
No, the DPRK had more of an outright denial. Russia had a non-denial and I kind of understand why, because I think for years, Ian, you can absolutely jump in on this, they had lots of like training and exchange programs. So I think North Korean, officers and army corps, they train in Russia. I mean, it's a fucking neighbor. There's an actual border. You can hop on a train, go from one country to the other, and they do this regularly, which is, completely normal. And I think that's what this is. But this goes also back to the complex, the NATO-Israeli complex. Look, this came from Kiev, I think. Either the Kiev Independent or Ukrainska Pravda, they wanted this information out there that, look, North Korea is helping Russia. We're just being helped by 50 countries, but that doesn't matter. We're all alone, little Ukraine, and they're being helped by the evil hermit kingdom, DPRK people.
So
you found it.
Well, I found allegedly, again, it's all allegedly. So allegedly, North Korean Deputy Foreign Minister Kim Jong-gyu said that sending North Korean troops to Russia, if it had taken place, would have been in accordance with international law. So it's just ambiguous, of course. And I'm looking for the comment
they trained together,
provided to Putin, or that was alleged to have been from Putin. But yeah, I'm happy either way. Like, I mean, I don't care. Like, is it a Western fabrication from start to finish to justify some sort of escalation? Maybe. Is there some truth to it? Are they there in a capacity of, support, of training, or are they actually fighting in Kursk? Like, I don't care, and I don't really know.
No.
But
Russia doesn't need men. For fuck's sake, get
true.
that point home.
I agree with that.
Well, it's just if there's, there are training programs in Russia, and they're not new. You also have to think of the numbers. I mean, how many people can North Korea possibly send that would make any sort of difference in Ukraine? Because you're talking about 1.1 million Ukrainians and maybe 800 or 900,000 Russians when you count the contractors and the border guards and everybody, everybody who's in and around Ukraine. So, what
plus,
difference?
I know they need training, but I think ever since Kursk, right, the people who sign up, volunteers have been overflowing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, they're high, yeah, but they have increased the benefits. They've increased the signing bonus tremendously. Also, it's around.
I don't think they needed to. Kursk is sacred ground, but anyway, continue with.
But anyways, the point is, even if Korea was sending people, I mean, how many could they possibly send? What's 3,000 guys going to do? A war with over 1 million people already involved. I mean, nothing. And especially if Russia's having to go through the burden of equipping and supplying them. What good is it? It doesn't really do any good at all. So it's like, what is even the point of doing it? Also, North Korea is still technically in a state of war. They have South Korea, which is propped up by NATO. So it's not necessarily even a good idea to divert people and resources to an entirely different military conflict that doesn't pertain to them. And, there could be, I'm sure they have observers, but you don't need to get experience. You do not need to send entire units to fight. You can send a few people because it's a train the trainer program. You have observers. They participate in Russian training. They observe Russian operations, and they come back home. You don't need to send everybody to do that.
So Ukraine, the latest number they're alleging is 12,000.
Fuck them.
So I'm not going to be able to find the statement on Telegram. I don't even remember which channel it was on, but in it, the alleged comment that came from Putin, he was referencing the Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which was signed on June 18th, 2024. So he referenced that, and he said, if something to the effect of, if North Korea has troops, then it just proves their seriousness in abiding by this, the Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. But it was ambiguous. It definitely wasn't a denial, but it wasn't, agreeing. So, it could be just a few trainers or a few observers that are going to then, take what they learn back to North Korea. That could definitely be it. And Ukraine is just trying to blow that up way out of proportion. It's quite possible. And that's why you see the denials, because and they don't have, obviously North Korea or Russia don't have any obligation to explain exactly what's going on, and they're not going to, right? So they're just gonna do what they're doing and be non-committal about it. It seems like.
Yeah, let me add to that. It would be foolish not to send observers to basically the force that already destroyed, redefined modern warfare and destroyed, an army of 50 countries combined, all their military might, all their high tech. That's the cutting edge of modern warfare. You'd be stupid not to send someone to learn from that. So absolutely,
for sure.
Should be.
For sure. And I think they destroyed at least four different armies. I mean, it's like the fourth iteration that they're destroying now in Kursk.
And sorry, to the other side, I do believe this comes from Ukrainska Pravda, somewhere in Kiev. That's where this allegation comes from, with this, look at these 3 Asian-looking Russian soldiers, or whatever the original picture was, not the flag-hoisting one. It's NATO. I mean, Kiev, I do smell the British in there, again, trying to work on the psychology of the US. If you don't hate Russians enough, maybe you hate the DPRK enough to come on, do those long range strikes, send the B-2 bombers, do something. That's what I see in the background of this, desperation.
Well, meanwhile, you have the United States in South Korea sending balloons and dropping leaflets and USB sticks into Pyongyang with K-pop music and propaganda against the DPRK government, right? And so
K-pop is the worst propaganda.
That resulted in a serious response by North Korea, a serious escalation on the DMZ. I believe they blew up the roads that connected the borders, the border area there. They blew up the roads, and they really increased the amount of military, the military force they had there, including artillery pieces.
I hadn't heard this. This escalated. I remember them sending back trash via balloons of their own, right? That stopped then?
So, no, I mean, I'm pretty sure the trash is a lie. I saw Brian Berletic speak to that, and I don't think that was actually true. That was reported in the West, that North Korea was sending, I don't know, balloons full of trash or something over to the south. But what was absolutely true is that the United States was doing this provocation against North Korea. North Korea was telling South Korea to knock it off. And then they showed they were serious, like I said, by blowing up the roads, by increasing their presence right there on the border. But so North Korea is serious, and they're really rattling the sabers, reminding the West that they don't have a monopoly on the threat of force.
Yeah, and I wonder if I can no longer put comments on the screen, but Todd just said, someone on Nima's show, which is dialogue work, said that occupied Korea sent F-16 and pilots to Romania as a response. So yeah, doubling down on stupid. Well done, Seoul.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like much of a provocation. I mean, they might have been there to begin with. Like, I don't think anybody would care or know unless they mentioned it. But so that's the question. I mean, is everything going to blow up after the election, and are we going to have a war on all fronts? The South China Sea, Taiwan, the DMZ on the Korean Peninsula, in West Asia. What is going on? Why is the West provoking things all around the world? To what end? And I think I like Ian's explanation. Incompetence. I'm okay with incompetence. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
You have to add desperation. The illusion built up for 30 years that we are the undefeatable umbrella, everybody can count on us, has been shattered. And that's when you get desperate to show somewhere you still really matter, no matter the cost.
Can be dangerous. Incompetence can be very dangerous, and desperation, of course, can be dangerous.
I am looking forward to, if you guys want to address the fucking election, because last time we spoke, when I was here, you mentioned Kamala's going to be installed. I wonder if that's evolved since. I haven't followed one iota.
Ian, are you still pretty sure Trump is not going to be allowed access to the White House?
I would be astonished if they let him win. I mean, it's because Trump is Hitler, and are they going to willingly let Hitler? I mean, I don't think you can scream for 8 years that someone is Hitler, then let him back into the White House. I mean, I would be.
So what are they going to do? Try to kill him a third time?
I mean, they can just count the votes and say, look, we found another 600,000 votes in this shoebox in Georgia. So that means Kamala Harris wins. I mean, that's what they did. But Biden did not even campaign. Like, I think and you had the COVID thing on top of that. I mean, he campaigned in his basement, and then they said, he had more votes than any other presidential election in American history somehow. So no, I would be astonished if they let.
I thought things were looking really bad for the Democrats. They did the Hitler thing. They got Obama out, right, to chastise the black people. If you don't vote for Kamala, you ain't black, basically. And all of those backfired, and the exit polls, basically. The polling is looking horrible for them. Like, I think they got Dick Cheney on the Democratic, the campaign tour now. Like, that's Dick Cheney's party now. I thought, like, the numbers I thought were looking horrible.
Yeah, I'm not gonna have certainty. I was agreeing with Ian with considerable certainty a couple months ago, but I don't have that same certainty. I mean, it's possible that they're okay with Trump. Like, I'm not certain they're not okay with Trump. But I know what happened in Moldova just a couple days ago with their was like a plebiscite or something. They did a referendum on something or other, and it was the shoebox effect. The shoebox that Ian referenced. They pulled the shoebox out to give the yes vote. Points.
Well, even worse, it's the diaspora shoebox. But go ahead, Ian.
I don't know if it was literally, manufacturing votes with Moldova, but I do know it's true. Like, it was actually became a meme. Like, they opened up every polling station they possibly could in the European Union, like in Italy, all these countries, even if there were barely any Moldovan citizens there, so that's why there were all these videos of empty.
We had them in Hungary, and I haven't met a single Moldovan person in my whole life.
There are, I don't remember the exact number, but there are apparently over 100,000 Moldovan citizens living in Russia, but for the entire country, they only had 2 stations, and they only sent 10,000 ballots. So even if they had more stations, they only could accept 10,000 votes because that's the only ballots they sent to Russia. So that was, of course, we know how Moldovans in Russia would vote. So it's very obvious why they.
Yeah. That's the one diaspora can vote, the other can't, basically.
And it is basically torturing the vote to try to get the results you want. Being excessively liberal with the areas that are going to vote for it, and then make it very difficult to vote in areas won't vote.
And getting a horrific result. 51 to 49 or something. That's a horrific result.
It was like, I think it was like less than 1 percentage point.
What was the referendum on? The yes vote
was solidification of Moldova's future in the EU and in the West. That's basically what it was all about. So, Maya Sandu wanted to basically constitutionalize that, saying no future government can touch this. This is going to be our future. It was a stupid thing to call anyway. But that's the Ian's thing. There's this semi-breakaway, not quite breakaway republic called Gagauzia. That's how the Russians say it. I don't know how the Moldovans say it. They weren't allowed. They weren't counted. Only the voices that are gastarbeiters in the West, those were counted. It's this selective counting. Yep.
The leader of Moldova initiated this referendum, and the point was to try and force the trajectory towards the EU and away from Russia. That's vast correct. Majority of actual people living in Moldova voted no against this referendum, and they relied on all these expat Moldovans living in the European Union. And then,
2 or 3 days later,
they opened up all these polling places, and with all of these people voting, and who knows, I mean, they might have just added boxes of votes. We don't know. And at the same time, the hundreds of thousands of Moldovans in Russia were not really allowed to vote at all. Like only 5% of them ended up voting due to a lack of polling places throughout the country. And so
the pro-Russian regions of Moldova, they were cut out too.
And the result was like a 50.4 to like 46.6. Like they barely eked out a victory. And again, the people actually living in Moldova overwhelmingly opposed were a no vote. So I think it backfired. I don't think it's going to really help the cause of, anti-Russia sentiment or, forcing Moldova to the EU side.
It will just grow the hatred for Sandu, that's for sure. I
think
that it was a very stupid thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, so Brian is reminiscing about when they had the referendum on to maintain the Soviet Union before it was unilaterally dismantled by Gorbachev. So thank you for that reminder, Brian. So we've almost got an hour without our guest. We did pretty good, I think. Any topics we want to touch on? I'm open to additional.
I had a thought still about this whole Moldovan thing, and unfortunately, it escaped me. So.
Yeah, so we will.
One small thought. It also pertains to the U.S. elections. I remember this making some waves. It was apparently on a podcast, but not a small one, like some established guy who was an Iranian American. Trump went on this show. I don't know if you've seen this. And the guy asked, "What about Iran? Shouldn't it go back to the time of the Shah when it was this beautiful, the top tourist destination or something like that?" And Trump said, "No, we can't get involved with that. We can't run the place." And he was very disappointed. And this is what the Hungarians in the US or the Moldovans in Germany remind me of. It's this swine who want more sanctions or to bomb my home country, to turn it, because I already have my little fortune here in the West. I've made mine. Fuck that old place. And that's what this guy was. And it came across horribly, I think, to most Iranians living in Iran, saying, what, this guy who was born in by blood, he's Persian, he's one of us. He wants Trump to commit to destroying us? That's what it looks like to the people who remained in the home country. That's the thought I had.
It was an interesting, I liked that answer from Trump, but of course, Trump does talk out both sides of his mouth, right? And he says, you need to finish the job, Israel, finish the job.
It depends on who he spoke to last. That's it.
He's pretty wishy-washy. Now, that reminds me, though, of a Georgian, one of the chair people in the Congress of Georgia, the main party that's in charge. He had an anecdote about being approached by a Western politician.
Good.
And the Western politician was suggesting that they open up, a second front with Russia. And the guy was like, well, what do you think we can do by opening up a second front? And the Western politician was like, well, you guys can hold out like 3 or 4 days. And he's like, well, what good is 3 or 4 days going to do you guys? And he's like, well, after
they're not going to kill all of you.
Right. Yeah. After that, you can go and, move to the forest and you can have a guerrilla war against Russia from the forest and we'll support you.
Astonishing.
And I mean, that really motivated me to write a big screed. If anybody wants to check my Facebook, I wrote a long article that was motivated by that, about how the West just, puts these compradors that they sell out their people and totally destroy the society of which they sell out. They get these golden parachutes. They come back to the United States. They live in their gated communities and they're revered and respected and, given platforms and, access to all the elite institutions. Meanwhile, they've destroyed their own society. So that's where Zelensky is going to end. Thank goodness for the people of Georgia that they don't have sellouts in power at the moment.
Dodged.
And they're balking at the thought of allowing their society to be destroyed for the benefit of the West. But you have people in the Philippines, what's his name? Marcos Jr. You've got this crazy person in Taiwan. And even
don't
South
forget
Korea.
Milei. Yeah.
Javier Milei. Yeah. So you've got all these sellouts selling their people out, getting these golden parachutes, and it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem for humanity. And hopefully it's something that we can overcome, but we need to raise awareness with normal people about what's going on and how this works, because it's so obvious. I
want to add quickly to the Georgian story, and then we can sign off if you like. I don't know. It was one of the Shvilis. There's a lot of Shvilis in Georgia, but the head of the Georgian Dream, the ruling party, who disclosed this rather shocking information, they passed what they call the Russian law, which is based on the US fire law, basically. Despite all the threats and all the warnings from the EU, and the EU from the highest level, I don't know if it was already, this Estonian bitch or a predecessor said, well, you're not going to get into the EU anytime soon. And all I want to say to any Georgian watching this, or anybody, you dodged a huge bullet, guys. Congratulations. Good for you. I wish we could have dodged this here in Hungary. We're in this swamp and it's really, really sticky and hard to get out of. So good on you. That's what I wanted to add.
It's like Georgia. Leftover nostalgia from the 80s, right? Where Eastern Europe became enamored with Western culture and the music, the movies, and there's
plastic bags and Coca-Cola.
Yeah. And that captured the minds of too many people in Eastern Europe. So there's a faction, there's a faction in Moldova that says, yeah, let's go to war with Russia. And thankfully, they're a minority. Thankfully, they're not in power. But it was pretty close. I mean, it was a close call. And wasn't there going to be an election really soon? And there was going to be, the EU was warning the government of Moldova, of Georgia. Did I say Moldova? I meant Georgia. The government of Georgia that, there's going to be protests during this next election. So, they haven't stopped trying to regime change this current government that's being, faithful to the national interest.
NED in action.
What's that?
NED in action. The new National Endowment for Democracy. Basically curating these crowds with ready-made signs in English. That's a sign of a nice English color revolution.
Yes. Okay, guys, we will wrap it up and we will reconvene on Tuesday. We did miss a few episodes. I think Charles might be able to make it back on Tuesday, and we're going to hope for better internet then. But I would recommend, again, checking out his Substack. It's in the description of the video, and hopefully he can join us then. But thank you, viewers. We will see you on Tuesday.